All right, so my name is Amber, and I manage the Sea Turtle Patrol in Hilton Head. This is my 25th season on the beach. My master's degree is in marine science with a focus on sea turtles, which is the most non-lucrative subject you could possibly imagine. Did anyone else pick that subject? Exactly. But I am passionate about it, and I will be doing it forever until I can't. Our mission in our 501c3 nonprofit is to monitor Hilton Head Beach for sea turtle nests every morning starting May 1st. And we're about to enter the hatching season, which means that we will be looking for new nests still, but looking also for the nests that we have laid in May to hatch. And we do public education every single night in June, July, and August, and other things. Okay. Educational things, just so it makes our job easier when you guys know how to act on the beach. So I can't imagine that y'all came here and you didn't go to the beach. If you're on the beach at night, there are a lot of things that you should probably know and know before you leave the beach during the day, so that when the turtles come, which is every night, that you should help us put the beach to bed, which is what we call filling in holes, picking up trash, making the beach look the same way you found it when you got there, okay? So what we're gonna do, we're talking a little bit about sea turtle biology, and then we'll talk about what we do on Hilton Head. There are 4 species of sea turtles out of the 7 that have nested on Hilton Head in 30 years. The biggest one of the crew, of the 7, is the leatherback. And we've had 5 of those in 30 years. The second biggest one is the green sea turtle, and we've had 9 of those. The one that we see 99% of the time is the loggerhead. And the Kemp's Ridley, we've had 2 nests here in 30 years. So not very many. These are the 6 that you might find in United States waters and South American, so American waters. The leatherback, the green, the loggerhead. Those are the 3 biggest ones. And then it goes from 400 pounds to 200 pound hawksbill, Kemp's Ridley, olive ridley. The one that you do not see there is the Australian flatback, and you will only find that one in Australia. Very good. So the leatherback has an adaptation for what it eats, and I want to tell you guys that they basically eat different things so that they don't compete with each other in the same ocean for the same food. Does that make sense? So it's like you pick McDonald's, you pick Burger King, you pick Wendy's, and then nobody has to stand in line. The leatherback's adaptation is what you see in its mouth right there. It is cartilaginous spines that grab its food source, which is jellyfish. So I'm going to give you the first one, and then I'm going to make you guess for the rest of them. An animal that gets to be 1,000 pounds, this one was 2,000 pounds, this is the largest one they've ever found. The shell alone was 9 feet. And then past that, it was the head and the tail. So it's probably like an 11-foot turtle. Think about an 8-foot ceiling and add 3 feet. Reptiles have indeterminate growth, which means they grow as long as they live. You hit a max and then you probably shrink a little bit as you get older. But sea turtles are reptiles and they never stop growing. So we know that this one is over 100 years old, 2,000 pounds, and bigger than average. But it gets that big by eating jellyfish. So you may have noticed when you go to the stores around here, to the grocery stores, and you don't get that plastic bag that you're used to getting at home possibly. It's a paper bag because we banned that single-use plastic bag. And the reason is because when that plastic bag reaches the water and submerges, what do you think that might look like? Jellyfish. Do you think that if the leatherback bit into that bag, that it could spit it out with those cartilaginous spikes that force the jelly down its throat? Do you think it could spit the bag out? No. So we made sure that that wouldn't happen with the sea turtles and that bag. You would see it in trees, you would see it. It just flew away everywhere it went. You could see it. So that is its adaptation. If it comes onto the beach, you do not need to call me and let me know. I will find it. The track is enormous. So 6 feet and is average for that shell. And so it leaves a mark on the beach, as you can see. Its eggs are bigger than the green sea turtles and the loggerheads, who are very similar. When you have a nest, the only way you're going to tell a difference is from the track. And sometimes the body pit. So this is the green sea turtle. It's the second largest. The green sea turtle is not green. It has to do with what they eat. And I give you a hint, it's not jellyfish. What is it? That's right. Green stuff. This is the vegetarian of the crew. And its adaptation are these little bumps. Do you see the bumps on its beak? The sea turtles don't have teeth. They have a beak like a bird. So with that serrated beak, it can saw the grasses down, and that way it doesn't have to rip it up by the root, and will have a renewable food source. This is the turtle that was used for a sea turtle soup back in the day, way before most of us were cognizant of what was going on. But in the 60s, they noticed that they weren't just finding it. They weren't finding enough to make an industry out of it. And then the Endangered Species Act in 1973 brought 3 of them to the list, and then another 3 later on in 1978. And the Australian flatback has never been on the list, because remember, this is an American law, United States law, and we don't have the flatback here. But sea turtles can't turn themselves back over. Once they're on their back, they can't do anything about that. So they were easy to keep. They couldn't run away, and they breathe air. So they didn't have to refrigerate them or do anything, keep them in the water. They just took advantage of that. But you can't do that anymore, of course. This is a green that was on Hilton Head 2014. It has a nesting behavior that's a little bit different from a loggerhead. It likes to burrow down. Do you see this turtle in here? That's the shell, and there's the head. The loggerhead, if you've seen a nest since you've been here, and we've had a lot of them, it walks up the beach, it crawls, and then when it gets to the dry sand, it does like a little snow angel, a little circular area at the top, whereas the green likes to burrow in and put walls up around it and makes a big, deep hole. But you can also tell by the track. So sea turtles all swim the breaststroke. Do you know what that is? Right, together. And when the green sea turtle walks on the sand, it walks just like it swims. So its track goes like this, right? 2 flippers in the front, you can see that really well. But the loggerhead decides to switch it up. When it hits the sand, it does 1 flipper, and then another flipper, and then another. So you have this little swagger. So it's like this up the track. A little swagger on that loggerhead versus the green sea turtle track. So this is our girl. She's not the prettiest one, you know, Moana and Finding Nemo, those were greens. And the green has a nice little petite head on a bigger body. See how little head seems, but this one has a bigger head on a smaller body. And that's kind of where its adaptation comes into play. It's the larger headed turtle. There's a reason. It doesn't eat jellyfish primarily, it can, but it doesn't search out jellyfish, it doesn't search out vegetation for food. What does it eat? Not fish, not seaweed. Crunchy stuff. So we've got crabs and whelk. Whelk is a snail that lives in the shell, right, that it makes. Urchins, lobster, that's a horseshoe crab in Calabogie Sound. So it's able to eat this. Like if you had to eat this, what would you do? You would pull the snail out the hole, right? Most likely with a fork or some sort of tool to eat that. Well, the loggerhead doesn't do that. And I'm going to explain to you how it's able to eat that without a fork. So its skull has all these big holes in it. Big eyes, even for a big head. And that's a big eye for a big head. Because the things that it eats do not float. They are underwater on the bottom, usually not a lot of light. So any light that you might have down there needs to be captured with those big eyes. How about the nose? What is that for? What do you do with your nose? You smell and you breathe, right? The sea turtles breathe air. They have lungs. They do not have gills. So what does that mean? They have to come to the surface to breathe, right? So if it's swimming like this and it tilts its head back, it can easily break the surface with that nose and keep going. If this nose was on your face, it would be right here. Okay. Now, if it needs to smell what's nearby on the ocean floor, how's it going to do that? Have you ever tried to sniff underwater like you're a swimming pool? You're like, I'm going to smell the bottom of this pool right now. No? That would not go well, would it? Okay, so how does this creature do it? What it does is it opens its mouth a little bit. It lets water in, it closes its mouth. And the water that it let in its mouth, it forces out its nose. Right out its nose. It's like when you have Coca-Cola and someone makes you laugh and it came out your nose. Do you remember doing that maybe with milk or something like that when you were a kid? Okay, so they can do that. And as that water passed by an olfactory gland, they can smell what's nearby. I mean, if you're on the planet for 80 million years, you can smell underwater. Pretty neat, right? Okay, now the two in the back, the two crevices, cavities in the back that look like where your brain would be. That's not for the brain. If you put your hand on your face right here and you bite down, do you feel that muscle right there, that muscle that pops out right there? That's your jaw muscle, and you feel like you could bite someone pretty hard. Yeah, too, right? But what if your jaw muscles were as big as my fists on either side of your face? Do you think you could bite hard? Yeah. Do you think you could take this shell right here, put it in your mouth, and crunch it like a piece of hard candy? Yeah. So they just break the whole thing to bits, and then the snail just falls out, and they eat the snail. And they eat a little bit of a shell with the snail, and that's calcium, good for the bones. So they can do that, and that's their adaptation. They have those muscles, those big muscles. The little hole in the back, and this is a real skull, so I could show you that little hole right there fits my pinky finger. What do you think that is for? The brain, right? And that's when the kids say, oh, that's a stupid turtle. And I say, no, that's not a stupid turtle. That turtle has been on the planet for 80 million years and it doesn't have to think anymore. It's born knowing everything it needs to know. It gets in the water, it knows how to swim. And it knows how to cross the Atlantic and end up in the Azores and the Canary Islands for 15 years. And it knows how to get back and what beach it was born on. I can't find my car in the Target parking lot if I'm in there for more than 2 hours. So a little panic attack happens. But these guys know everything they need to know already. This is the hawksbill. It's called the hawksbill because its beak looks like a hawksbill. And it helps them eat something. That's not jellyfish, that's not seagrasses, it's not crabs and snails. What is it? Not fish yet. Soft corals. So we don't really have this one around here because we don't have this sort of food for them. So you'll see these kind of in the Caribbean and the Pacific, Hawaii. They use that beak to get in there and get that coral. They're not vegetarians because coral is an animal. But they are the ones that have the most beautiful shell. So if you see that tortoise shell and your glasses that you buy at the store, those are imitations of this turtle and the keratin that's over its bone. So the little squares that you see there are keratin, like a fingernail. So this is a real one that fell off of a turtle that washed up here, dead. And it is one of the squares that cover the bone to protect it. So this turtle actually, if you could see under that, this is fake, obviously, but if you could see under the keratin, this shell would be just bone, like white bone. And you have a shell in your body. Do you know where it is? Right underneath this ridge on the turtle, right down the middle, is its spine. And you have a spine. That makes you a vertebrate. and your ribs come off of your spine like this, and they wrap around and they have spaces in between. But if you didn't have the spaces and your ribs fused, that would be your turtle shell right there. So the shell is their rib cage fused together with keratin covering the bone. Okay? So this is the one that has the most ornate shell. Now these two, the olive ridley and the Kemp's ridley, they are omnivores, which means they eat fish. She's been saying fish. Right, fish, shrimp, whatever is fast and they can catch it, because they're only like 150 pound turtles. And they're similar, but they're not the same species. For a long time we thought they were. But in 1901, Richard Kemp said, this one's different. It only has 5 squares down the back and 5 on the side. And this one always has multiples of 7 or 8. You know, it's more than 5. And that's always. So all you have to do is look at their shell to tell the difference. And they do seem a little different. Okay. He named the second one after himself, which is, I guess I would do that too. Why not? Okay. This is Hilton Head. In case you haven't recognized it, we are somewhere around here right now. Sea turtles over the last 22 years, you can see where they like to nest. They like the toe down here on the south end, sea pines. And they like over here on the heel, kind of Port Royal area. And the thing that those two places had in common for a long time was that they did not have rental properties for weekly rental, short-term rental. So residents know to turn your lights off. They typically don't party all night long because they're not on vacation. And so the beach is quieter and it's dark, quiet and dark. That's what the turtle likes. They don't like it here where we are for obvious reasons. Because there's a lot of activity on the beach right out there, because we've got the bars and the restaurants and a lot of congregating going on out there. This is our team, and we need a new picture. This is a few years old, but just a variable group, right? There are people who are retired, there are people who are dog walkers, paddleboard instructor, lifeguard, town employees, retired teacher. This one started the programs in 1981. She was asked to monitor sea turtles on Hilton Head Beach by DNR. Dead ones. They wanted to know how many dead ones. Not how many were nesting, how many were dead. And she called me a few years back and asked me if she could start Turtle Patrol after years and years. And absolutely, how could I not? Okay. This is our graph, and you know, we work on this every year. These are our numbers for nesting totals. And you can see back in, like, this is 2000 right here, and we were excited to break 100 nests. Like 100 nests on 14 miles of beach, we thought that was really good. Now, we get upset if we don't get at least 300. So we are getting more nests. You can see how it goes up and down because sea turtles do not nest every year. They take a 2-year break usually. So they put 4 to 6 nests each in the ground. So every 2 weeks. So the turtle that nested today will be back in 2 weeks, and then she'll take another 2 weeks, and then she'll come back and she'll put a nest, and then she'll come back. And they just do that, but that takes a lot out of them, so they take that big break. So the turtles that nested in this year, well, the turtles that nested in this year. So you can see that this population is the lower population. And then the next one was bigger, so they came back. And then these guys came back. And then in 2010, it didn't do the same thing anymore. It just kept going up and up and over and up. And we were like, what's going on? Oh my goodness. But if you take the first year of the program in the 80s, early 80s, and you add 30 years, which is how long it takes for a sea turtle to become sexually mature, able to lay eggs, we were there. So the turtles that we were protecting in those early days were returning. They were returning. And they were getting older. So the older they get, the bigger they get. Remember? Does anyone remember what that was called? Indeterminate growth, right? Keep growing as long as they live. But the bigger they get, the more eggs they lay, the more nests they lay, and it's going to be a big difference if one of them doesn't show up. So instead of having these, you have big drops, because if they don't show up, then you're taking more nests out of the count. Does that make sense? Okay, so what we did also in 2010, coincidentally, is start participating in the DNA program. So for every nest, we take one egg and we put the eggshell into a vial just like this. The egg looks just like a ping pong ball. And the egg goes to the University of Georgia, and from that he can extract the maternal DNA, which means the mother, from the outside of the shell. From this study, we know who laid it. Whenever she came back, we'll know. So how many nests she's laid on our beach, what other beaches she has visited in South Carolina, Georgia, and North Carolina, who her sisters are, who her mother is, who her grandmother is. We have 2 grandmothers that are nesting in South Carolina that we have documentation of. If you are a grandmother laying eggs, because you have granddaughters that are 30 years old, how old are you? 90. Still laying eggs at 90 years old. At least 90. Pretty impressive. We've got lots of mothers laying eggs at least 60 years old. And then the new girls are the blue line. So we don't get a lot of new recruits. 1 in 100 of our hatchlings will make it 3 days leaving the beach. Everything eats a hatchling. They are only this big when they leave. Okay? Sharks, birds, everything gets them. They have a 3-day swim from Hilton Head to the Gulf Stream. 1 in 100 make it to the Gulf Stream. They go on the North Atlantic Gyre over the Atlantic Ocean to the Azores and the Canary Islands, and they hang there. But they can't nest until they're 30. So 1 in 1,000 we'll see again. So because they are so long-lived and so slow to mature, it's really hard to regain our population. So even though we have these nest numbers going up, 463 was our record, we only had 132 turtles laying 463 nests. So does that surprise you? Right, so the turtles that we have are big enough to where there's only one predator besides man that can get it. What is it? A big shark, right? That's the only thing that can eat a turtle that is big enough to lay eggs, which is this big. Oops. Okay, so what we have is a lot of boat strike situations where we take the nesting turtles out of the population. That can be harmful, right? So you have to be careful of your boater. Plastic bags, so plastic ingestion, that sort of thing. Disease, sometimes we don't know what it is that causes it, but we call that DTS, debilitated turtle syndrome. It just means we don't know. Okay. So this is what we're looking for, these tracks. People say, Amber, you are going to have so many nests tomorrow because it is high tide and a full moon in the middle of the night when they come out. Like, first of all, if you have 120 eggs in your body that have to exit your body, it doesn't matter what the tide is doing, what the moon is doing, they have to go in the sand, right? So that really has nothing to do with it. If you look at the track that I took that picture of, do you think that turtle would have waited a couple hours if it knew the difference between high tide and low tide? I think so. Because what does it take to drag a 400-pound body up the sand with your elbows and shoulders? If the ambulance hadn't died, I would have a carpet right here and I'd have somebody do it for me. It's harder than you think. So they only walk when they're 30 years old after they were a hatchling and walked down the beach to the water. They swam in the ocean for 30 years before they ever walked again. So they went from being this big to that big, right? 400 pounds. So can you imagine what they must think when they come out of the water to nest for the first time? Like, whoa, this is way harder than I remember, because when I was a hatchling, I just went right into the water. And now I'm like, And that's as fast as they go, literally. It might take 20 minutes just to walk up the beach, especially if it's this one. Once it gets to the dry sand, it can feel that the sand is dry under its chin, and it starts to move that loose sand out of the way. It's got to dig a hole with the shovel that's attached to the underside of its carapace. Stands up on its back flippers, starts to dig a hole, right? With the shovel. Are you guys awake? Have you ever seen a turtle dig a hole with a shovel? Okay, me neither. So what do you think it digs with? Flippers, front or back? Back. Okay. So the front flippers get them there, right? And then they use the back flippers one after another, and they scoop the sand to the side, and then this one goes down and scoops the sand. And they have that flat flipper, but it can cup like this. It's like if you put your hand in a mitten, if you put it in a mitten, you would see that you could do this, right? Inside the mitten, that's what they can do. They've got like phalanges inside those fins that are flat. And it looks like they have a really small back flippers compared to front flippers, right? But this is just a replica, and it gives you kind of the wrong impression. So when a sea turtle is in the water and it's swimming around, it's using its front flipper to launch, and it's using its back flipper as a rudder, and it's got its knee bent, basically. But when it goes to dig its hole, that back flipper straightens out, and it's as long as the front flipper. It might freak you out a little bit when you see that. But they're going to dig this hole one after the other, and then they're going to start to lay their eggs. How do they know when the hole is deep enough for 120 eggs? The measuring tape that's on the other side. The hole is as deep as the flipper is long, and the hole is 2 feet deep. So watch as she puts the sand to the side, and she flips her other flipper. She doesn't want to get sand back in there. And then when she's got the hole deep enough, she drops this cloaca. It's like an egg tube that retracts when she's done, and the eggs are falling out of that tube 3, 4 at a time. They're like they're reptile eggs, so they mush in like this. They're not chicken egg type shells. If they were, they would break as soon as they hit the hole. So they bounce a little bit. She's pushing them out, and she does this for 120 eggs, which looks like this. Okay? So this is 120 eggs, and that's a lot that's going to fit in that hole. Okay. That video is too long to watch. Okay. So when we come across the area where she covered those eggs back up, it looks like a snow angel. And in that snow angel, we have to find a hole that's about 6 inches in diameter. Okay. I need an assistant. All right, so 6 inches in diameter, probably about like that big, maybe a little bit smaller. And that is where she's gonna have put a foot of sand over those 1.5 feet, right? So it's pretty deep. So when we're pushing around with a probe in the sand, and we're pushing, it's hard, compact, pushing. She didn't dig there, she didn't dig there. But when we get to the area where she dug, the stick is gonna sink in. And we only can sink in about that far, right? We don't wanna go any farther than that because we might hit some eggs. So we stop really quickly, and then we use our hands and we dig down until we touch an egg with a glove. And then we take one egg out, and then we put that into the DNA tube, right? Okay. If we move it, we're going to relocate it to higher ground. We put it in a bucket. We dig the hole exactly the way we found it originally, and then we place those eggs back in, okay? We're gonna leave them there for 45 days marked off. Why do we mark them off? Is it because it helps them incubate? No. Why do we mark it off? Have you thought about that? So people won't accidentally sit on it dig it up in a sandcastle, build a sandcastle over it, things like that. So it's just really to let you know where it is, right? It doesn't help the turtle actually incubate. Now, when we move them, that helps because the eggs have to stay dry. The turtle knows that it laid eggs in dry sand, but it could have been a quarter moon, not a full moon, where we have a higher than normal tide. We know where the full moon watermark is, so we know the eggs have to be in there for 2 months. We're going to move them above that watermark just to be sure. And we can do that within 24 hours. After 24 hours, they start to incubate, and if you rotate them, move them in any way, they stop and they don't restart. So we have to be very careful to make sure that we do this within 24 hours. Do you see the embryo on the white half? And the yolk is the part it's feeding on. Okay, so this one had to be moved because the storm was washing it away. So that was an instance where it was atypical. We had to get permission to do that. But some of them did actually hatch. So that was okay. Now, the turtles come out at night. And so why do you think they do that? Why do they come out at night? It actually works out better in the long run for us because we go out during the day. But why do they come out at night? Less people? I mean, that's like a plus, but that's not the reason because it's cold. It's cooler. They're reptiles. They can't sweat. They can't shiver. They can't control their body temperature. Did y'all get hot today at all? I know it was hot. Yes. So this turtle would die if it came out during the day and took 2 hours to nest. So it has to come out at night when the temperature is right. Unfortunately, it can't really see where it's going. It has eyes, just like you do, but you don't see in the dark. So if it comes up and it hits a tent or a chair or something that it's not prepared to run into and it gets frightened, it turns around and it just leaves. Now, it might try again further on down the beach. If it does, and then someone comes up to it with a white flashlight in its face, it's going to turn around because it's afraid and go back. And if that happens more than, let's just say, 3 times in a night, is pretty typical, then they just don't come back out. So what happens to the eggs? Now remember, there's another clutch forming every 2 weeks. So what she got to do with the eggs that she couldn't deposit? She just drops them in the ocean and they don't incubate. They just die. Something eats them, but they don't make it. So that's why we have an ordinance on Hilton Head that after sunset, all personal property has to be removed. So if you accidentally left your chair on the beach, it's always an accident, and it didn't stay there, it's because we have a contractor that picks those things up and they take them to a town facility. This is Stumpy, and Stumpy is here this year. See how her flipper is missing on the back left? Stumpy, because they take a 2-year break, nested last time in 2020, and before that in 2017, and before that in 2012. How do I know that? DNA, right? So she nested great in 2012, no problems. Plenty of nests. I think she had 5 nests. There were no weird tracks, no aborted digs, which means they start digging and then they move on. And so then 5 years went by and we took her out of the catalog. We thought somebody got her, like a shark or something. She died. Then she shows back up in 2017. And she made the front page of the Island Packet because she got stuck in the dune. It had been a while since she had done this. And we found that she was missing a flipper. This was the next day after her Island Packet showcase. And she hadn't laid her eggs, but she was still trying. I took a picture of her and I was like, well, that's an interesting picture, you know. I can see where the shark got the turtle, whatever. And then in 2020, I started patrolling the beach at night because of the personal property issue. And I came across her and I was like, you know what? Stumpy can't dig a hole. Maybe I'll help her dig a hole. And I did. And she laid her eggs. Both of us dug the hole. And then 2 weeks later, I ran into her again, not literally, and came across her track and we dug the hole again. And her eggs hatched beautifully, 93%. So there's nothing wrong with that part of her. She just couldn't dig the hole. Guess where all the hatchlings went? I wish they went to the ocean. That particular nest went all of them to the porch light that was left on in the rental property behind the nest. So after all that effort, we dug the hole together. She laid the eggs. I did not help with that part. And then we lost them. So it's really important that you guys, if you're staying beachfront, that you have those lights out after 10 p.m. or at least downward facing and shielded, the appropriate fixtures. If you're walking on the beach at night, you should have the appropriate flashlight. You should definitely have a flashlight because you could fall into a hole and break your ankle, and I'm not gonna want to see that either. But red lights do not attract hatchlings, one, and they are also less bright, so they don't interfere with nesting so much. Okay, so those are the rules there. Filling in your holes. Like, why would you fill in a sand hole? The hatchling fall in, you know, they're only this big. So it only takes a hole that's like less than a foot deep and not very big. And they get trapped in there, and then the birds come at sunrise and eat them. Okay, or they overheat in the sun when the sun comes up. Why, and you know why to turn your lights off. And so other things, obstacles like sandcastles, well, why do we have to put our sandcastle down? Well, so maybe your sandcastle is not so large that the turtle can't walk around it, but it's gonna divert its path. It's got a 3-day swim ahead of it. You don't wanna have them waste any energy because some of them aren't gonna make it. In fact, 1 out of 100 will make it. So they've got to swim from here to here. That's 70 miles. Once they get into the Gulf Stream, they get to rest and eat, and then they float across. This is the North Atlantic Gyre. Off the coast of Portugal are the Azores, and off the coast of Morocco are the Canary Islands. And at some point, because of continental drift, they might have been closer together. Turtle is attracted to that area with the Nile, and then it comes back across at 15 years old, and then it forages for another 15 years. And then it nests. Oh my goodness, sorry. Okay, so if your house looks like this on the beach, there's a problem there. That will definitely attract hatchlings. This house we retrofitted in 2020. What happened in 2020 was not a good year. So it did get a lot of publicity, but this house was the worst offender on the beach, and it attracts so many hatchlings. So we asked the owner if we could change all of their light fixtures and replace 8 exteriors, and then understory, there were 10 of them. We put them recessed LED timers, and then upstairs we did downward facing shielded with red bulbs. And that house has not been a problem since. So $5,000 later, we have the retrofit. And if you can afford to live in that or own that house, you can afford to retrofit it. Okay, when we made the ordinance about holes, did you know there was a rule about holes on the beach? Do you know what the rule is? Your hole can't be deeper than a foot. You can't dig it with a metal shovel. It has to be plastic, and it can't be bigger than 30 inches. And you must fill it in before you leave. That is actually a law on Hilton Head. How hard is that to enforce? Impossible, right? So I'm just going to ask you to fill it in no matter how deep it is. But if you have time to dig this hole, something's wrong. Are you going to bury somebody? It's like a Jimmy Hoffa hole. But we were having these, so we had to document them and explain to the town why we needed this ordinance. Only a full-size garden spade could dig that hole. They were massive. They were everywhere. This turtle almost fell in on its way up to nest. That's the nest that it laid. So that has actually worked out really well for us. Now, if you are here, nest number 1 is due to hatch, like 1 through 10. We just started. We haven't had any hatchlings yet. But if you look into the triangle and you see like it looks like it's collapsing in the center, when those eggs are incubating in there, they're in the shell like this. They're all curled up and their flippers are wrapped around them like this, and they're wet. And they have this sharp little horn on their beak, and they rip the shell, and they straighten out and they dry out, and their shell grit gets harder, and then they start moving around about 3 days so that everybody in the nest has hatched and they are moving around together. And when they're doing that, that foot of sand that she put on top starts to shift because it was sitting on a mass of eggs. And then the sand gets to the bottom and essentially starts to lift them up to the top. It's like a narrow tunnel that the mother left for them a nap. When they get up there, they stop about this far under the sand, and they stop. And sometimes they get too far and their little head's peeking out and they stop. And it looks like they're dead, but they're not. They're waiting on something. What do you think they're waiting on? Darkness, why? The coolness, right? They can't come out during the day either because they'll overheat and die, just like I'm about to overheat and die. So it's important that we aren't, when they're right under the surface, even if you're shining your red flashlight on them, they can see that and they won't come out. And if you're near the nest trying to see the hatch, they can sense the vibration of you shuffling around out there and they won't come out. So, same with nesting turtles. If you see a 400-pound reptile walk out of the water and it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience, I'm not going to tell you to walk away, right? But there is a good way to do this. You should always be behind them. Hatchlings, nesting, all of them. Be behind them. They can hear you, so you have to be quiet. But they're not real, I'm not going to say they're not smart, but they don't react. If they can't see you, you're almost not there. They can't hear you, you're almost not there. So even if they see you at first, as long as they can't see you after that, they'll continue up and do their thing. You should always give them a respectful distance while they're doing it. If you spook them while they're digging their hole, they leave. We call that an aborted dig. But once they start laying eggs, they go into a trance and they don't stop. So you can whisper and you can talk and you can shine your light at the eggs falling into the hole, okay? But please remember that I'm giving you just enough information to be dangerous. You should always be conservative when you're around them, just so you don't mess it up, okay? But once they're on the way back, you can't really get in the way of her laying her eggs, right? And that might be just when you come across them. But this is a hatch. They all come out together, and hopefully they go the right way. This happened to me during the day, and the reason is because a storm was brewing, and when you have rain coming, temperature drops, and they all came out during the day, which works out for them because now they can see where they're going. At night, what's their beacon? The moon. And it's not the moon they're following, it's the moon reflecting the water, which is what they're looking for. They're looking for water, and the moon simply tells them there it is. And I noticed this years later, but this turtle hatchling is going the wrong way while everybody else is going the right way. And he does fix it, and watch what he does to fix it. He's got sand on his eyeball, so he had to use his finger to get the sand off of his eye. And once he did that, then he could see the water, the open horizon, and he went the right way. So we know that they go by vision to the water. And I just want to make sure y'all know they don't follow the moon. There's a children's book that says follow the moon. That gets me every time. They don't follow the moon. They follow the ocean and the moon shows them where it is. Okay, so at the end, after they hatch, we wait 3 days and we count all the empty shells, we count the eggs that didn't hatch, dead hatchlings occasionally, and release the ones that are still in there. Sometimes they get stuck, and we give them that chance at the water's edge to make their way to the Gulf Stream. Now they've been in that hole for an extra 3 days. And the reason I want to impress upon you about filling in holes and picking up your personal property and trash and that sort of thing is, I need all of the hatchlings to get to the water together. Do you know why that might be? Yeah, they've got a journey ahead of them, but what's waiting for them as soon as they hit the water? Predators, right? What kind of predators? Yep, some birds, but they're usually during the day. But sharks are waiting there, and they know that food is going to be walking off the beach every night, okay? So they're like mouth open, ready to go. If you've got 100 hatchlings hitting the water at once, one is going to make it through that line. If 50 of them go to the porch light, 20 of them fall in a hole, and another 50 make it to the water, do you think the 1 in 50 is going to make it? Maybe none of them make it. So I need to get all of them in there so that that one can make it through that predator boundary and get to the Gulf Stream. Our success last year was 76%, which is the highest we've ever had. 62% was average for us. We had a lot more. And that has to do with moving them away from the water, making sure that, you know, we do that properly, and a lot of work goes into it. These are predators that can happen on land. We've only had a coyote situation 1 year. Those are invasive in this area. Raccoons prefer your pizza crust and your trash can. So, thank you for that. And crabs, those ghost crabs that you see on the beach, they'll get 1 or 2. So they're not a significant predator. The shark, of course, once they're in the water, and the birds. Okay, so genetics, sorry this is really bright, the same beach, they come back to nest. They're born on a beach, 30 years later they come to the same beach they were born on. And when I was in grad school, we thought it was literally the same beach because we didn't have DNA information. The same beach is a magnetic signature because of the magnetite in their brain. They can find their way back to the beach they're born on, but it's not a particular beach. This one lays its first nest in Hilton Head, down here, and a couple weeks later, it lays a nest in Hatteras, North Carolina, or near there, Nags P Island, actually. So that's her same beach, right there. This one picks Hilton Head only and puts her nest within 300 feet of the others. Very specific. So you can't say they all do it the same way. We do know there is a 3-state boundary. At least we know the states. This one does what I would do. This one picks an island every nesting season that she does, every 3rd year. So she picks Hilton Head, she puts all of her nests on Hilton Head. And then in another season, she's gonna pick Botany Bay, she puts all of her nests on Botany Bay. So she's not swimming in between. This one starts in North Carolina and just starts working her way down the coast, just like she's headed to Florida. She's working her way down, and she's like, oh, pull over. As long as it's in this one of those 3 states, I don't care, just pull over, I gotta get rid of these, right? And then she just keeps going. This one, first of all, crossed the state line into Jacksonville, which is only 2 hours south of us. But she goes back and forth from Hilton Head to Jacksonville, back and forth, nesting in the same season. That makes no sense. That's a waste of energy, but who knows why they do what they do. We just know that it's limited to those 3 states, the Northern Recovery Unit. Okay, so there are a lot of questions I'm sure that you have. I have spent 25 years on this and $65,000 in graduate school loans, which I did pay off, to be able, thank you, to give presentations and talk about my passion. I'm a boat captain for a living. It doesn't, it's not a career move that most people would do. But people with passion do it, passion for it, and it can't explain where it comes from, but it's an experience that you might have had in your life where you knew what you wanted to do for the rest of your life, and if you were lucky enough to have that, you know what passion is. And I will always do this, and this talk is obviously free of charge. If you're interested in supporting our program, you can go to seaturtlepatrolhhi.org and dedicate a nest, where you can dedicate as a gift to somebody a nest for $50, and you get all the information on that nest, how it hatched, where it was, all the good stuff, who laid it, possibly, if we get the DNA back in time. So check that out, and there's an awesome video as well on our website. But now I'm going to open it up to questions. Anybody has any questions? I know there are always 2 things that I leave out, and so if y'all don't ask questions, I'm going to bring it up, and let me see if you think of what it was. Okay, I'll come back to you. How about the males? Is anybody going to ask about the males? There's not a lot we know about them. We know that when they're sexually mature, they have a tail out the back, so it's really easy to tell the difference. They have a foot-long tail out the back, so I mean, big tail. And the tail wraps around when he's mating. That's what he uses it for. So the female, you know, may be out there, and the male's plastron, which is the undershell, during the mating season becomes concave like this, so he can fit over the top. And he has a claw on the leading edge of his forward flipper that that grasps the leading edge of her shell, and then the tail wraps around, and then it looks like a huge fight. I get phone calls from other boat captains. Captain Amber, these turtles are having a fight. You got to get over here right now. It's nothing good about what I'm seeing right now. I say, no, they don't fight with each other. That's something else. That's what they're there for, and that's all we know about them. Good question. The sex ratio in the nest. Males or females? How do you know? So the temperature of incubation results in the sex of the turtle. Very good question. If they incubate in the second third of incubation, around 40 days, above 82.4 degrees in South Carolina, they become female. In the second third of incubation, if they incubate below 82.4 degrees, they become male. So the temperature affects their sex, no X and Y chromosomes. So if you can remember it this way, chicks are hot and guys are cool. You remember that? Alligators, also reptiles, completely opposite. Chicks are cool, guys are hot. Okay.